Hey everybody, I'm Jack Wheeler and I'm an alcoholic. Just saying that settles me into my chair. There was a time where if somebody would have asked me to talk on 6 and 7, I'm not sure I would have been able to do it. Today I have an experience with it, and when my son and I had that conversation Tuesday, I went home and thought about what he said. It says in the book that we find a place to be quiet for an hour after we have these conversations, and we lay these things up against the first 5 proposals. If I left anything out, I'm making mortar without sand. And I can tell you that I've done all of those things. And I went home and I got quiet for an hour that night. And I just thought about what he said to me. Here's my son, 33 years old. He's smarter than I am. He's an architectural engineer. Emphasis on MEP. And he's brilliant. But more importantly, he's kind. And he's loving. And I said he's normal. But he grew up around the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he's walked into my office in the back, in the office, and walked in and said, "Hey, I don't want you to quote the big book at me. I want to talk to my father." Are we playing the role we've been assigned? I'm his father. And I thought about what he had said to me, and he said to me that he finds out everything in the company secondhand. And I prayed about it and asked God to make me a channel and show me where I can grow in understanding and effectiveness. And I thought about step 6, and a man that was a mentor of mine and a close friend that's no longer with us. I heard him do a talk on Charlie Parker, and I called him Charlie P. yesterday. I've never once in my life called him Charlie P., except for yesterday. Didn't sound right. And he still rolls in my shoes with me. He showed me the practical side, the pragmatic side of 6 and 7. And I heard him do a talk at Usual Suspects a few years ago. And I still have it noted in my book the things he talked about. And he talked about his humanness, those things that had him hooked. And he said that in step 6, it asks us 4 things, And I'm thinking about what my son told me, and I'm going through those 4 things. Is it objectionable to me? And I can tell you that I don't want to be the guy that makes my son feel that way. But more importantly, I don't want to be, professionally, I don't want to be the guy that leaves everybody in the dark and then surprises them with the new plan. I want to be a servant leader in my company. And so I got to look at some of those things. It's objectionable to me to put him in that position. I don't want to be that guy. Is there anything I can do about it? That's the second thing. And I can tell you there was a couple things I could do about it. I went into the office the next day after spending time with 6 and 7, and I said to my son, I said, "Listen, I need your help." I said, "Will you share with me every time you feel that way on what I did specifically?" And he said, "I would be happy to." And he laughed. And laughter's healing, man. And I said, I told him I don't want to be that way. I said, I don't know if I can change it, but I'm willing to. And it would help me if you could point it out to me when that happens. And so is it objectionable to me, and can I do anything about it? And if I can't do anything about it, what's left? I'm powerless over this stuff. I didn't even see it. And then it comes to the big question, if I can't do anything about it, who can? Do I think God can fix it? He's fixed everything else I've ever brought to him. And am I willing to let him do it? That's step 6 in a nutshell. And I'm in that specific piece of business that I'm looking at right now, this spiritual. I told you that in my sponsorship lineage, we try to keep things above the spiritual horizon because it's easy for me to tamp it down in my daily life. And I will keep that as a piece of spiritual business. And step 7 is the voodoo shit in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we laugh, but the reality is, insert the needle here and it causes pain over there. And I don't even know it. And I can remember my sponsor, I don't know, it definitely wasn't the first time I'd gone through step 7. It was probably the 500th time I'd gone formally through step 7. And I'm so goddamn concerned about doing it right. And my sponsor asked me one day, he said, how's step 7 going? Because he had sent me home. He had listened to my inventory and he had sent me home. And it was probably a week later and he said, how's step 7 going? And I finally said to him, I said, Don, I have no idea what my job is in step 7. I have no clue. None whatsoever. Can you give me a hint? And he said, Jack, God has a job in step 7 and you have a job in step 7. Well, okay. We're going to answer my question with riddles today. And I said to him, okay, what's God's job? And he said, God's job is to remove your character defects. What's my job? He said, your job is to act as if he did. And I thought he was telling me to act as if I have no character defects. So I went about the business of acting like I have no character defects. How do you think that went? I'm serious. And how many of us try that? I'm not going to be self-centered today. I'm not going to be dishonest today. I'm not going to be full of fear. I'm not going to be resentful. Try it. That's the story of early recovery, is me trying to act like I'm a different guy. And Don's gone now. He passed. And it might have been after he passed that I realized what he was telling me. He was telling me to act as if God's the power. If it's like Don said in the last session, what if it's marching orders? What if it's true? What if God's the power? If I believe here that God's the power, how am I going to act? Am I going to have time for an evening review? How many people did an evening review last night? Not by a show of hands, because I know you're liars. But we get caught up in life, and there's things that are more important than me acting like God's the power. I'm so wrapped up in what's wrong and knowing what it is and putting my finger on it and tamping it down that I don't spend time with God. I got news for you. They're objectionable to me in 6, and I want them to go away. And then I say the prayer in 7, like they're going to go away. Like I have to get rid of this stuff to qualify. The first line in the prayer is, God, take all of me, good and bad. And I think that I got to be good. But we're all sitting here. Think about the meeting last night. How many of those things that you guys shared are just on your ego because they're bad? You know, it's a shift in consciousness when we take the seventh step into our shoes. It's a change of who I be. And all of a sudden, I'm not so concerned about the character defects in the name of them and how they poke out, because I haven't been able to fix them. I spent 18 years as a volunteer fireman, because if we want to put the fire out at the ranch, we got to go get the truck ourselves. And the reality is that I spent 18 years as a volunteer fireman for my community. And when I first joined the fire department, they send you to a fire academy. And when you're from rural Colorado and you get to go to a fire academy that has a burn building, a live burn building, it's pretty exciting. And we roll up with the crew from the station to the fire academy, and we did a bunch of classes in the morning, and then you get to suit up and go into the burn building. And I'm sitting with my team guys up on the hill. There's a grassy hill, and you go into the basement of this structure to do the live fire drill. And we're sitting up on the hill watching guys going in and out of the burn building, and some of them are coming out and they're excited and, you know, high fives and fun. You know, you could tell it was a big deal. And some of them would come out with their face shields melted down around their helmet, and they've got burn marks on their face where they didn't get their bunker gear up right around their mask and the SCBA mask and stuff. And you know, you could tell things didn't go well. So we watch 10 teams go in and out, and they call our number, and I'm thinking, what the fuck? And we go into the thing, and I'm thinking, I know what to do, right? I'm going to put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. And I've got an ego, and I roll into the thing, and I got the guys behind me, and we got a 4-inch line that we're on, and there's two old guys standing on the side telling us what to do, and you could see it in their eyes. You know, they knew what we were going to do. And they flare up the fire, and I open up the hose and I slam the fire with the water, and when you do that, it creates steam. And the steam rolls up to the ceiling in the superheat layer, and it brings down the heat layer because it's full of steam now, and it wraps right down around your head, and you think you're going to die. Because the fire doesn't respond to a direct attack. You make it worse when you put the wet stuff on the hot stuff. And what they teach you to do is they shut it down and they keep you safe. And my face shield melted down around my helmet. I still have that face shield hanging in my garage because it's cool. And the guys shut everything down and keep you safe. And then the old guys come over to the side, from the side, and they start telling you, hey, listen, you can't do that. I'm like, well, what the hell do you do? I'm thinking, you got to put the water on the fire. And he said, no. He said you got to take the water and you got to spray the ceiling first. And you sweep the ceiling, and then you come down in a Z pattern, and then you put the fire out. Because when you sweep the ceiling, you cool the heat layer. And when you come down the wall, you cool the heat layer, and it starts putting out the fire slowly, and then you put the fire out. Every character defect in my life I've tried to take care of with a direct attack. Every single one. What they taught me to do is treat the atmosphere first. Treat the atmosphere of the room so that it's a situation. I can tell you that I've gone into buildings and all I did was cool the walls. And when I did that, the fire went out. It's counterintuitive. It's not the way it should work. And I can tell you that's the 7th step. It cools the atmosphere of our life. You know, when we go out and do our amends, our character defects fall away. I don't have a single character. You know, this thing with my son. I'm 61 years old. I've been doing this my whole life. what he's asking me to change is ingrained in me. He deserves that I change it. And what I know is I sat with him and I told him that I apologized to him that next day when we were having the conversation, and I asked him to point out to me when it happened. And then I apologized to him for putting him in that position, that he's an owner of the company and I'm making decisions without talking to him. And I told him, I don't know how I'm going to make this right, but I know I'm willing to make it right. But if there's something you see, let me know. And in that place, I'm cooling the atmosphere of my life. I'm giving him permission to talk to me. I'm giving him the reassurance that this is as important to me as it is to him. That's all 7-step stuff. I'm allowing God into the space. I have character defects because I don't let God into that space. We talk about these boxes in our life. It went around the room last night, and every guy had somewhere where he's not. I'm not, you can have my drinking, but you're not touching my sex life. You can have my drinking, but I got the finances over here. My journey here is broken down, I would like to say every box in my life, but I know there's work to be done. There's work to be done. And if I can come about this thing with 6 and 7, those things that are objectionable to me and have been objectionable to me for 20 years, 30 years, and I can't change it. Am I willing to lay the whole thing down? All of it. I spent years rodeoing, riding bulls and stuff, and we had an outfitting company, and I've spent the last 5 years having orthopedic work done on my body. I've got 2 shoulder replacements. I've got a knee replacement. I just reconstructed my ankle, and what I know is there's more in the future. And I'm not pleased about that. It's on me. And I have to take that stuff through this process for me to stand up and be whole. And we have the conversations here like that. Have I invited God into all areas of my life? If you ask me that question today, I'll tell you yes. If you ask me that question 2 months from now when I'm wrapped around the axle about something and something's got me, and I'll tell you that there's going to be an area where I didn't even know I have an area. And that has been the story of my life in recovery. In that process of 5 years of orthopedic stuff, I can tell you that my wife and my sex life is, it's not what I want it to be. At the same time, I don't have the energy, I'm sick, I'm recovering, whatever it is. But I can tell you because of these steps, because of the transformation that happens here, my wife and I have been in a conversation about it for 5 years. And we've made it a spiritual piece of business, and we've talked to our sponsors about it, we've talked to other people about it. And if you would have told me that I would be okay with my wife talking about my lack of performance in the bedroom was going to be okay with me, I would tell you you're crazy. And I'm the guy that can roll around thinking, I'm just getting old. The reality is that I still have that drive, I still have that thing inside me that says it's supposed to be this way. I'm probably wrong, because this is the way it is. And we've managed to keep it at a level in the conversation with each other that it's easy to talk about, it's nice to talk about, and we take advantage of the openings. And I don't know where that came from, other than saying that it's part of this thing. Because my character, you know, that piece inside me, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want you to know about it. I want you to think that I'm rock solid there. And the reality is I'm not. You know, it's been a challenge, and it's a challenge I get to walk through with these principles, with these things, these processes that we go to that take us to a whole nother place, man. And what I can tell you today is that God is the power. You know, and he'll take me in any condition I am. The cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're new here, is it meets us right where we are. The cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, if you've been here for 38 years, is it meets us right where we are. Right now. Today. And I didn't think that when I came in here. I thought I'd come in here and I'd stop drinking and I'd be good. You know, I was talking to somebody earlier and I came in here and I stopped drinking and I was worse. And sometimes that can get on us in sobriety. You know, so what are we doing? What's the active measures? What's the pragmatic approach to step 7? Sometimes it's to cool the atmosphere. I'm not going to change that thing with my son overnight. I don't know that he believes me. I know that we have been through enough where I think he may have some hope in the process. And if you're new here, I hope this weekend you get some hope. But I can tell you hope is about tomorrow. The pragmatic program of action that we learn here is about today in my feet. And it shifts from this program of hope to this program of action where I can expect some results. Unfortunately, I'm the guy that will work the steps to try and resolve an issue with my son. And if I'm starting the process trying to resolve the issue with my son, I'm starting from the wrong place because it's a self-centered motive. Doesn't make any sense, right? You know, how many times have you called your sponsor and he asks you, did you write about that? He's not interested in what you're writing about. He's interested in where you're going, where you're going to be delivered. You know, how many times have you written a piece of inventory and ended up where you just can't fill out that last column? What's your mistake? Where are you to blame? The world and its people are often quite wrong, period. They're wrong. What I was doing with my son was correct. It was right. I'm the boss. Is that who I want to be? I think the most powerful thing in Alcoholics Anonymous is the collective consciousness of a crew of guys that are running towards God. That collective consciousness of a bunch of guys that are on the same spiritual path, having the same conversation, talking about their flaws in their makeup, their character defects. We're really just talking about our humanness. There's not a new problem here. There isn't. And we think we're so unique that we're the only one that have ever experienced this, and somehow I've got to figure out how to make it go away. When was the last time you said something to a guy and he was shocked? It doesn't happen. The character defects that we're all working on are the human condition. What changes is how we approach them, how we see them. Do I think this is the last time I'm going to have a sex issue with my wife? I've been with my wife for 45 years because of Al-Anon and AA. Because she has a spiritual path, and I have a spiritual path. She has a sponsor. I have a sponsor. We do not sponsor each other, although we judge each other's program once in a while. And sometimes we have those conversations, and she's right. And it's a safe place in our house to have that conversation. My wife's sponsor is a wonderful person, and she has taught us that a very important thing for us to understand is the presumption of goodwill. How many times does somebody say something to you and you assume that guy's after you? How many times does your wife open her mouth and share something with you and you take it as a direct attack on your manliness? Whether it's my ability to make money, my ability to be a good father, my ability to be a good husband, and we take it as this personal attack. What would happen if I presumed goodwill in that situation? What would happen when that guy I've been judging at my home group for 2 months now, and I can picture the guy right now, is doing the best he can, and all I have to do is presume goodwill? I have this judgment machine built into me. And the reality is that my wife and I have taken that direction from her sponsor to try and presume goodwill in life. And it's changed everything. So what happened if I believed that God loves me as much as I tell my sponsees that he loves them? That it's all good. That you're not coming at me. I'm just in the radius. That you're not coming. My wife isn't giving me a hard time. She's just sharing something she's going through. She's not looking for me to change anything. She's looking for me to be a husband and listen. You know? And I take everything so personally. And if I come to that place in 7 where I trust that God's the power, where I trust that he takes all of me, good and bad, and will put that to good use out there on the streets somehow, it's all good. It's all perfect. So in that place in 7 where it said, where my sponsor said it's my job to act as if he did, I believe in my journey here there's been character defects that have fallen away. You know when I realize it? Way later. I just realized I'm not that guy anymore. That I'm not beating my steering wheel anymore. You know? And it was nothing I did. At the same time, it's everything I did. It's the fact that I've spent time with you. I've spent time with God. I'm current on inventory. I have a current spiritual awakening. I look at these things in 6 and 7. There's nothing I'd rather do than sit around on a weekend and talk about God. And talk about how we get there. Because it's a mystery, man. But somehow we follow these directions. And the directions in 6 and 7, the best thing I've ever heard said about 6 and 7 is that there's nothing else to write. That's why it's so short. But it has been the backbone of, when I say to you that the 3rd step is the entire solution to Alcoholics Anonymous, 6 and 7 seems to be where it hits my life, where it hits my shoes. Am I willing to act like it? You know, am I willing to take something that's objectionable to me and just give it to God and let it rest? And go out there, be of service. You know, to live my life based on principles instead of motive. That's a hard thing for us to do. You know, I'll tell one more story and give it to Don. I was driving up the road. We had a big problem with a job. And my daughter was the PM on it. My daughter's an active member of Al-Anon, whose sponsor just died 3 days ago. So put my daughter Jessica in your prayers. And she got a phone call from the client. The client's pissed off, wants to fire us, and it's a long story. And it's a big job. It's a, I don't know, $5-6 million contract. And and the owners just called my daughter and ripped her, you know, just gave her a hard time and made her feel like she couldn't do her job. And and I was on the phone with them at the and basically they called me a buffoon next, and I take that very well. And I'm driving up to meet my daughter. And I told the owners, well, let us take a look at things and we'll get back to you and we'll have a meeting, go through everything. And they did not want to have the meeting. They wanted to fire us, and we convinced them to take a breath. And I'm driving up the road to meet my daughter at their house and at the project, and my daughter calls me up and says, we should just quit. We shouldn't work for people like this. And I had just gotten off the phone with my buddy Danny, and I was telling Danny about it. He's in construction too, and I said to Danny, I got to go to this meeting. It's going to be, the owners are acting poorly. And he said, Jack, what you should do is follow God in. When you open the door to the construction trailer, let God go in first. And I'm thinking about that after I hung up with Danny, thinking that's not a very useful technique. And my daughter called me up right after I hung up with Danny. And she says to me, we should just quit. And I said, just because we have somebody behaving poorly doesn't mean we're not going to go up there and be principled. I said, we're going to go up there and we're going to be principled, and we're going to tell the truth, and we're going to try and be of service to them. And I said to her, God's going to be in the meeting with us. I said, when you open the door to the construction trailer, invite God to go in first. And I'm sure she hung up the phone thinking that's not very useful information. And we got up to the construction trailer, and we walked in, and we told the truth. And I invited God to go in first. And my daughter did too. And it was a good meeting, and it worked out very well. And it was, we were just coming out of the ground with the foundation of this place and presenting final budgets. And the owners never like the final budget. And what they don't know when they don't like the final budget is it's not the final budget. And we set the stage for all of that with them. We set the expectation, and we told them the truth, that while this is uncomfortable, it's going to get more uncomfortable because the design isn't complete. We told them the truth. And it set the stage for a project we built up there that ended up getting published in 2 magazines, and the owners are thrilled, and it was a great experience to build the house. That's the 7th step in action. That's what it looks like to have it in our shoes on a daily basis. And today I can presume goodwill. They were just scared, and they didn't know how to act. So they acted poorly. How many times have you been scared, didn't know how to act, and just acted poorly? Can you let someone else do that? I generally have a hard time with that. And 6 and 7 being in my shoes allows me to roll through life knowing you're you and I'm me. And we're all just in the human race. And what does that look like? Can I give you enough grace that I'm looking for? And it's been a life changer for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. Don, alcoholic?
Hey, Don.
Yes. Character defects. I'm glad that's over. Sometimes we talk about these things, and, I would hear somebody talk, and it sounded like you could get rid of them. It sounds like you could arrive at a plateau where those things were in the rearview mirror, and I know today. That's why we joke. That's why we call it 2 little paragraphs. Our friend Bill C. says, yep, 2 little paragraphs you'll be doing for the rest of your life. And that's character defects. And nowhere, is there a convergence of the idea of one day at a time and the powerlessness that I'm introduced to in the first step. There's a collision of that in 6 and 7 like no other place for me. That I so desperately want to be rid of these things when I'm done with inventory for the first time. Because inventory was, my first inventory did what it should have done. It wasn't as accurate as other inventories. It wasn't as illuminating as other inventories. But it did what it needed to do, which is it completely turned me around 180 degrees. I mean, I went into that thing convinced that people, places, and things were the problem. I had a narrative, a story, whatever you want to call it, that explained my life away. And I walked out of it going, oh my God, I'm the monster. And it was new information, which is what, we talk about this inventory, particularly our first one is in all inventories, is a process of discovery. They use that word when they use the analogy to the business inventory. So we're going to discover the truth about the stock and trade, and discover it means new information, previously unknown. And there was so much new information that came out of that first inventory that was previously unknown. And you could say that it was because of denial or this, it was always there. Trust me, I was unaware of it. And all that information was bad news. None of it was good news. So I was broken by that. I wanted desperately. And I do what I do when you scare or threaten me, I turn to self. And I turn to self with steps 6 and 7. And what I know today, more than anything, is this idea that I was introduced to brand new in AA, where they said, we do this thing one day at a time, kid. And when you're new in AA, it should mean nothing more than this. If I go to bed sober, my head hits the pillow and I'm sober, I've had a successful day in Alcoholics Anonymous, regardless of what my head or anybody else tells me. And that has to be the measuring stick. We're not doing well enough our way out of here. A lot of us do that. And I know I'm sitting here 33 years sober, and I'm thinking this, I thought I'd be better by now. I really did. You ever have had that thought, really thought I'd be better by now? And the truth is, some days I am, and some days I'm not. And one day at a time is completely a different definition today. And yeah, if I stay sober today, I have a successful day in Alcoholics Anonymous, but there's some stuff I got to do on a daily basis if I want to have that, because I'm not ignorant anymore. I understand the terms of engagement for recovery from alcoholism. I got to get up in the morning, I got to ask myself the question, who am I going to serve today? Because I'm going to serve somebody. Bet your bottom dollar I'll be serving someone, right? Am I going to serve self, or am I going to serve God and his kids? And I can take anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, anything you can find in this book, and I can turn it into a self-centered exercise. How can I make myself feel better? We lost a really great AA member this year, or at the end of last year. I can't remember when Don went. Last year, Don Majors. And Don said something every time he spoke that I thought was just simple but profound. And he said, without divine intervention, I will always let how I feel be the most important thing in the universe. That's me. And the reason I like that quote so much is it tells me the folly of thinking I can do something about my default setting. I can do something about that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble. I will always be led back there organically with no effort on my part. It's almost as though when Jack talked about this march to God that we join in brotherly, harmonious action, it's as though there's a rubber band attached to me. And the harder I stretch to get to God, and that's where I want to get, if I don't pay attention, I snap back to my starting point, which is always selfish and self-centered. My character defects are alive and well. I think that everything I came to Alcoholics Anonymous with is still intact in place in my life today. I would like to think these things were parasitic in nature. There's things that these character defects have attached themselves to me through the years before I got to AA, and now I'm going to use God and the steps and good sponsorship to whittle them off of me, never to return. They seem to be what I'm made of. And there's no waste in God's economy. I think that one of the things that I suffer from is I'm the guy with the label gun, right? I'm the guy who's saying this is good, this is bad, this is acceptable, this is unacceptable. And I've already proven to myself for a long time, before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm a very poor judge of my life. I learned in AA to adopt the seemingly good and the seemingly bad philosophy. How many times have I thought I was doing well when it turned out I wasn't doing that well at all? Or how many times have we thought we really weren't doing too well and we were doing just fine? My perception of reality at any given moment is suspect. I'm a poor judge of what's really going on. And so character defects, if I try to get involved in that mix at all, that's going to be problematic. I'll tell you something that I always thought was really interesting. I did a lot of community service when I got sober, when I cleaned up my wreckage. It's part of what I had to do, and I was lucky enough to do it at the Salvation Army, which was helpful because I needed clothes. And one of the things I started to do when I worked at the Salvation Army, and I continue to this day, I'll stop by thrift stores, is I go to the book section. And I started rescuing discarded AA literature. And it's just something fun to do, you know, and every now and then you get lucky. And even today, I get really excited if I'm in a, you know, Salvation Army or a Goodwill or whatever, and I find a big book, you know, and it's always nice to find a big book. But if you get really lucky, you get a big book that's been used. And you open it up and there's a name in there. And there's a date written in ink, which is incredibly optimistic, right? And then if you're really lucky and you start turning the pages, there's step work in the big book. And you'll see notes in the margin, and you'll see little handwritten notes. And I will start to judge this person who I've never met, the quality of their step work. And I'll, you know, they'll be in the doctor's opinion, oh, a phenomenon of craving, you underlined that, very good, 5 points, you know. And as I'm going through the book and judging the step work of the person I've never met, as I'm going through the chapters in Bill's story, and there is a solution, more about alcoholism, we agnostics, how it works, and without fail, you get to into action, and through that whole thing, it's highlighting, notes, and you get done with the 5th step, and the rest of the book is pristine. And you can literally, it's a visual representation on when the person lost their momentum in the steps, when they lost their spiritual propellant, when the moment came where they went, okay, that's enough. And you know, in the last session, we were talking about inventory. And sometimes we talk about these things like they're one and done. You know, we remember fondly our first inventory, but we can't discuss with great clarity the inventories we've done after that. If Alcoholics Anonymous is what the book refers to in 3 different places, is truly designed for living, and the steps, when they boil down, is our design for living, and the compartmentalization that we suffer from when we go through the steps the first time, we know when we're on step 2, we know we're on step 6, we know exactly where we're on the steps. What if, through staying in the process of the steps repetitively over and over again, the steps aren't built in an ascending manner, they're built in a circle, and around we go in our design for living. What if the loving hand that's God, without our permission, seemingly pulls out the compartments that seem to separate the steps, and they become one design for living, where they blur into each other, where it's just how I work out the solution to the question I've never been able to answer my entire life till I came to you. And what's the question? How the hell do you live life on life's terms without putting something in your system to anesthetize the concussion of reality? That's the question. How does a guy like me live his life without putting something in me? Because I just don't do reality really well. And that's the first thing you introduced me to when I came to AA. When you go to your sponsor, you go, I can't believe this is happening. He goes, well, you better believe it, because it's happening. You start realizing we're big on reality. So in step 6 and 7, I had this collision. And I think what happens to a lot of us, and it certainly happened to me, and it's what happens in that big book I just referred to, is we get done with inventory, and it's good information. God, I love information, don't you? It feels powerful. Information masquerades as a solution in my life all the time. Let me say that again. Information masquerades as a solution in my life all the time. Now I know. Oh, I'm glad that's over. Haven't done anything. Haven't brought anything to God. Have no humility about it, but I got information and it feels powerful, and it feels like I can build with that. I can do something with that, because now I understand. Have a dust up with the wife. Do a little inventory. Clearly see where I'm wrong. See where I've made my mistake. See my lack of spiritual preparation. Formulate a plan. The next time that happens, this is the way I'll react. 4 days later, same thing happens. How do I react? The old way, intuitively. I am off the ground and diving through the emotional hoop, and I don't even feel that I've left the ground. It's intuitive. I can't stop myself. It seems to be who I am. And I start to get scared because then I start to think, what if I can't change? You know, towards the end of the session, Jack said something and it just rang a bell for me. And I go, and that is exactly right. That's exactly how you know. You don't know you've changed. It's always hindsight. It's always that moment where days, sometimes weeks after something happened, you reflect on something and you go, you know, I always act a certain way when that happens. I have my whole life. And not only did I act differently, it was intuitive. It felt natural. There was no thought process, as though that had been removed. Some of the stuff, now I can play, and I don't think it's a bad thing, to act better than you feel, to act as though your character defects have been removed, to act appropriately, to take the next indicated action. I think those are all wonderful tools. But I know for me, if you're talking about real change, I can't do anything about that. I can act like a guy who's had his character defects removed, but I'll tell you what happens with a guy like me. I'm a guy that can suppress what's really happening with me, and what I'll do is I will practice, and it is a spiritual tool, it's called self-restraint, and I will practice self-restraint. Let me tell you about self-restraint. It is only to be used when it's coupled with other spiritual tools. If you use self-restraint in an isolated manner and you don't get to the underlying cause and condition, this is what happens. One day they ask you to pass the salt at breakfast and you flip the table up in the air. And here's what they think. My God, he doesn't like salt. Because I've got to take this stuff and I've got to do something with it. And just like the book I'm talking about in the thrift store, I can be the guy to do inventory and stop there. And what am I really? What do you really have when you're done with inventory? You have the most pure, unadulterated form of self-knowledge you've ever had. But what does it say on page 39? It says that for the real alcoholic, he'll be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. It turns out that self-knowledge kills alcoholics. It'll take you back to the first drink. But here's the other thing. Self-knowledge will keep you in your character defects. Because if I think that knowledge is power, information is power, I don't need God. I do not have a lack of information. I'm 33 years sober. These things that we talk about, these character defects, these aren't new. It's not as though the old ones have been replaced and I've gotten new ones. These things are decades old. These things go back to my childhood, some of them. I'm very familiar with them. I've been thinking about them for a long time. There's things about myself that are true that I wish just weren't true. Not new what? Information. Apparently, I don't have a lack of information problem. I have a lack of power problem. And when I stop with inventory, and inventory doesn't produce what? Humility. I can't do anything about this. That's hard to say. Because I'm a man. I've been taught you always do something about it. But what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous is great power in humility. There's great power in saying, I can't do anything about this, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May I bring this to my Heavenly Father now. Let's not delay. So I don't want to be the guy when I'm done with inventory that doesn't immediately realize this should have produced some humility for me. The fear shouldn't be, oh my God, look who I am. The fear should be, oh my God, there's nothing I can do about it. That should produce some humility. But I'm like everybody else, I think, that goes through the steps for the first time. I want to be perfect. I want to be better. I have a list, because that's what I was told to do, and I wrote a list of my character defects, and it's 127 items long. Can you imagine getting up in the morning and having 127 cats released into the world, and it said, go get the cats, because that's what it felt like. I felt like I was playing whack-a-mole with my character defects. Let's see what character defects Don's. It's the worst game show in the world. Do you know what I mean? What's he in today? Resentment and fear. You don't know what's coming next. And you feel like you get a handle on one thing just to have something explode in another area. And I'm making myself crazy because I think I'm in the management business when I should be in the labor business. I don't know that God is management and I'm labor. I think we're in it together. And I hear those words in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't get hung up on it, but I wonder if it's true for the people saying them when they talk about me and God. Me and God are working on my character defects. Me and God aren't doing anything on my character defects. That's God. He's management. I'm labor. When you look at step 3 and you look at step 7, my sponsor talks about, he says, step 3, you get to ask God a question, right? Your sponsor takes you over to the edge of a cliff, and you both look over, and you see nothing but the abyss. Nothing. And then your sponsor smilingly says, jump. And you look again, and you still don't see anything. You go, you jump. And he smiles and goes, I already did. Well, if I jump, what are you going to be doing? Well, we're going to be watching to see what happens. Because that's the truth, man. We'll tell you, if you come with us, join us, do what we do, go where we go, we have absolutely no idea what's going to happen to you. We don't. We just promise you it'll be significantly better than anything you could have planned yourself. That's the guarantee we make you. We don't guarantee we know what's going to happen. So the question I get to ask God in the third step is what? Can I trust you? It's a big question. I'm making a decision to turn my will and life over to this thing I don't fully understand yet. I'm willing to go on a journey on steps 4 through 9 because I want what you have and I'm willing to go to any length to get it. You have made it look so attractive to me that I'm willing to do what you did. And when I ask you, what did you do to get this thing that's so attractive to me? You said, I worked the steps. I had a spiritual awakening. I have a relationship with this power I didn't believe in when I came here that's turned out to be the most important relationship of my life. It's made all things possible. And you made it attractive, and more importantly, you made it accessible to me. It seemed within my grasp if I was willing to take a few simple actions. You sold me on it. But I still have to ask God, can I trust you? Because it's a big ask. Because I read the words on the page, and I take them to heart. I'm going to turn my will and life over to this thing, and I'm not even sure if I believe in it. You're asking a lot of me. And that's okay, but to ask the question. I think it's very human of me. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm betting on the wrong horse? Yeah, I know I've made a mess of my life, but I don't want to make a mistake here. And then I start going through the process, don't I? 4 and 5, things start to change. Big information, big humility. 6 and 7, now I got something. I can go back to this power that I didn't really believe and I really didn't understand. And now I'm starting to have, after my 5th step, I'm starting to have a spiritual experience. It's not complete yet, but I'm feeling the nearness of my Creator. And I go back to God with these things, and I know myself better. And I said, Dad, I'm back. We were just talking in the 3rd step, but I'm back again. I've done some work. I want you to have all of me, good and bad. And I'm asking you, I offered myself to you, and now I understand even on a deeper level how important it is that I do that. You can have all of me, but take away everything from me that you think is objectionable, because I don't know. I look at it all, and it all seems a mess to me. And I told you in the 3rd step, you could take me, and if you could make any good use of me, go ahead and do it. Because I can't see any value left with me. So take away the ones that you say are wrong, you say are objectionable, that stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Because what I'm committing to in the 7th step is this and nothing less. I'm committing to a life of service. And we wonder why, or I wonder why. I read the words on the page and I think I want that, and then I go and I live in a self-centered manner and I wonder why I don't get traction. Because God gets to ask me a question in step 7, and we don't talk about that. But it's only fair. I get to ask God if I can trust him. Guess what he asked me in step 7? Can I trust you? You're going to hold up your end of the bargain. I love you. You're my son. You're my kid. And I'm going to do this because I love you. But do you mean what you say? Are you going to keep your word? So when I keep my word, that's all I'm being asked in step 7. Keep your word, right? Because I asked for strength as I went out to live my life. To do what? To help him and his kids. I didn't ask to be successful. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for a great woman. I didn't ask for my dreams to come true, my self-centered dreams. In the 7th step, I asked for strength to go out and do his bidding to help his kids. Am I keeping my word? Because here's what happens when I keep my word. My character defects are instantaneously removed. They can't draw a deep breath. I try to fix them by being a better version of what I think Don's supposed to be. That's not what I'm asked to do. When I released those 127 character defects upon mankind and decided that they weren't going to exist anymore, I had varying degrees of success and varying degrees of failure. Most of the time, I just ended up exhausted. It was exhausting. I don't know how God does it, because when I play God, I'm just exhausted all the time. You know, he must be omnipotent because it wears me out. It ain't easy being me when I'm running the show. And I ran around, and I remember reading something in the 24-hour-a-day book, and which is not conference approved, and I don't care, it's a great book. And it talked about the danger of treating our character defects as though they were things that were growing on the branches of a tree. He said you can spend the rest of your sobriety with a pair of spiritual pruning shears, and you can go from branch to branch, and you can cut off the things that you decide are objectionable, never understanding that there's only one problem, and it's underground, at the root of the problem, which is my selfishness and self-centeredness. If you were going to ask me how many character defects do you have today, Don, I'd say I've got one. I've just got one. I'm selfish and I'm self-centered. From that character defect spring all the other character defects that you could name by name. They're all manifestations of self. My favorite, I'm inconsiderate. That's my big character defect. And it sounds bad, but it is what it means. I don't consider you. I'm inconsiderate. I live in a state of self. And the people of the world, even the ones that are close to me, the more selfish I am, you turn into shadowy figures in the movie of my life where I'm the star, I'm the director, I'm the screenwriter, I'm everything. And you don't really exist. And the further I move away from self and the closer I move to God, interesting things happen. You start to materialize. Isn't that interesting? I can't see you when I'm in a state of self. I live in a state of inconsideration. I will step over you when you're on fire. I don't want to see you on fire. I just didn't notice. You didn't notice I was burnt? Not at all. The blinders that are produced when I'm in a state of self are astounding. The missed opportunities for service, the missed opportunities for joy, the missed opportunities for love. I live in a singular fashion. I become isolated and cut off. Alcoholism, sober or drunken, alcoholism is a degree of separation and isolation. Nothing separates me and isolates me more from my fellows than this state of self. So I don't run around the world today chasing my 127 character defects. What I do is what the book has always tried to teach me to do. And when I do this effectively, I have a pretty good day. And this is all it is. Improve your conscious contact with a power greater than yourself. All the energy that I wasted trying to fix myself for years in Alcoholics Anonymous, trying to be a better version of me, I took that same energy and put it where AA's always asked me to put it. Why don't you work on your conscious contact with God, Don? Why don't you grow that relationship? Why don't you see that when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out both mentally and physically? And when I read that, I misunderstood that for a long time in the big book. I understood when the spiritual malady is overcome, but when it said we straighten out mentally and physically, I didn't know what that meant. And Joe and Charlie actually explained it in a way that made sense to me. He said, the physical isn't my body. I thought I got in better shape he said, that's the physical world. Your relationships with people in the physical world will be repaired also when the spiritual malady is overcome. It says when the mental is overcome, that just means my thought life suddenly becomes a place that I can spend time in and I don't have to be afraid of it. That my thoughts actually produce comfort rather than distress. So here's how I deal with my character defects today, and here's my experience. And it sounds simplistic, but it's accurate for me. When I am simply trying to live as I think God would have me live, truly, and as it says in A Vision for You, with my heart and my mind attuned to the welfare of others, simply trying to live the way I think God would have me live, do what I think God would have me do, react the way I think God would have me react. For that moment, or moments that I'm in that state, my character defects are instantaneously removed. But like anything removed, it can be returned. And what does that mean? Does that mean that if, I'm operating, something scares or threatens me, and I'm spend half my day in a state of self, does that mean all hell breaks loose and I'm going to end up in jail or drunk? Of course not. I mean, my character defects are just, they're like a vicious tiger, right? And through the process of the steps and the relationship with God, somehow the tiger got put on the leash. And, at first it pulled on the leash. I got to be honest with you. It pulls on the leash all the time. But like anybody, once they figure out they can't break the leash, the tiger just rolls up in the corner, goes to sleep. That damn tiger is so quiet now, I sometimes forget he exists. I can't even hear him snoring over there most days. But I'll tell you what, let me live in the state of self for a couple of days, a week, 2 weeks. It's like an invisible hand comes over and unclicks the tiger. And it's not as though the tiger knows he's off the leash immediately, but eventually he goes, hey, I'm free, and all hell breaks loose in my life. And I'll think to myself, what happened? I was doing so well. I'm not a guy that can exist in a state of self-centeredness unabatedly without picking up a tab. Now, the good news is it's not cause and effect. It's not like selfish punished. God loves me too much for that. God lets me take field trips away from him all the time. Open arms. He's always open arms. And I've taken a lot of field trips from God over the years. And I've come home many, many times with my tail between my legs, saying, Dad, I don't want this anymore. Please take this from me. And he's always taken it, and he's always taken me back in. I don't think the problem in the relationship is on God's side. Let's take a break.